Shalom. That means hello and goodbye in Hebrew. Today I've chosen Israel as my cultural CLE project, and I'm going to be making chicken shawarma. It's a great dish because in Israel, their culture and their food are very heavily defined by those around them. The Israelis don't particularly have one specific culture because of all the vast differences in the region. You have over 6 million Jews in Jerusalem alone and over 1.7 million Arabs in Jerusalem alone, which means that you're going to have a very, very large diversity, and that is where chicken shawarma comes into play. Traditionally a more Arab dish that the Jews have taken and made their own, I'm going to be showing you the Israeli side of this dish and the way it would be traditionally paired from an Israeli perspective. So first things first, for our chicken shawarma, we're going to go over all of our ingredients. What it's basically going to end up being as a final product is we're going to have our pita bread right here. We're going to have our chicken that's going to be fully cooked. And we're going to drizzle this zug over it, which is like an Israeli sauce. It's got green pepper, a little bit of lemon juice, some coriander seasoning, and a little bit of cumin. So it's going to be a little bit spicy, and you can kind of choose the spiciness based on how much pepper you add. It's going to be great. We're going to top it all off with some cucumber and a little bit of tomato, and hopefully we're going to have the perfect native dish. Alright, so step one, we're going to take our spices, which is essentially the same spice mix that we had in the zug. It's going to be a little bit of cumin, we've got a little bit of salt, pepper, and a little bit of Alright, so the first thing we're going to do in making our shawarma is we're going to take our chicken. It's going to be boneless, skinless thigh meat, and it's going to be about 1 pound. We're going to apply our dry rub to it. Our dry rub is essentially the same as the zug that I showed earlier. The only difference is we're going to have a little bit of caraway seed. We didn't have that in this wet rub. And it's going to have the same ingredients as far as the ground cumin and the coriander goes. I've already gone ahead and put it in the chicken. Now I'm just going to go ahead and mix it up really quickly. And the trick is you got to make sure that it's liberally applied to all sides of the chicken. And then once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw it in the skillet, and it's going to be about 5 minutes on each side, or just until it's golden brown and ready to slice. So the first thing we're going to want to do is add a little bit of olive oil to our pan here. And then kind of just move it around in the bottom there. Let's make sure it coats it pretty evenly. And then we are going to add our chicken meat. Add a little bit more olive oil to that. Kind of just move it around the bottom of the pan there. And then we're going to let that sit for about 5 minutes before flipping it over to the other side. Alright, so I'm going to let that finish cooking. There's just a few more minutes left. Should be golden brown on all sides. So while we wait, I'm going to go ahead and go over some of the cultural aspects of Israel. Israel is a lot like the West, mainly because they did inherit their land from the British after the Second World War. The Jewish immigrants migrated there to form the state of Israel, but they do have their own independent set of customs that would be very shocking for an American who wasn't fully prepared when he went to Israel. So a few things about business in Israel. Number one, whenever you go to Israel and you meet an Israeli, you have to readjust to the idea of personal space. Their personal space is not like our personal space. Here in America, if somebody gets really close to you, you might want them to back away. 3 feet is usually the rule. In Israel, a lot of Israelis will step up to you and they'll approach you. And hand movements are a major part of their culture. There's a lot of things you can say just through the movement of your hands, and the Israelis love to convey emotion through the movement of their hands. So when you go to Israel, you should remember that it's not very uncommon for them to walk up and get close to you and look at you and use different keys that you wouldn't use in our culture, because their culture is heavily based upon relationship. A lot of Israelis look for personal relationship in a business setting before they're going to look for other certain facts and elements, because that's the way their culture is designed. They use a lot of hand gestures and they like to get very close because it's simply an integrated part of who they are. Another fun fact is that if you're going to do business with, say, a person from an Arab background, you would want to make sure that you avoid handing them something with your left hand. Here in America, I'm going to go ahead and give my film assistant Caleb a knife. If I gave it to him with my left hand, that's not that uncommon. It's not awkward. I might be left-handed, so it's no big deal. But you should always remember that in Israel, if you were to do this, handing somebody something with your left hand, we don't perceive that in a negative way. But there, it's a cultural taboo to use your left hand to hand somebody of an Arab background an object. There are many different differences in culture, and whenever you're going to travel, when you're going to market, you have to keep the political situation in mind, and you have to remember how certain people see themselves. Many of the Arab population see themselves as Palestinian, not as Israeli. You have to remember that there are different governments, different political backgrounds all at work, and there are different ways that people view themselves as part of their different cultures, and you have to be respectful of that when you market to Israel. So right now our chicken is looking like it's done. I'm going to go ahead and take it off here and wait for the oil to die down since I don't want it to burn me. And now we're just going to wait a few more seconds for that to settle down. And then I'm going to begin slicing it into really, really thin strips, because when you make shawarma, you slice it into really thin strips before you load it into your bread. What I'm probably going to end up doing is, once I put it all inside the bread, I'll probably have to hold it together with a toothpick, because this bread is flat. It's not the traditional bowl shape that you can just pile everything in and kind of hold it all together. So we're going to be using toothpicks. There we go. And we are going to begin slicing our chicken shawarma. Alright, so almost done completely cutting and shredding all the chicken. And normally when you make shawarma, you would have a gigantic rotisserie and you would just stack all your meat on there. And normally what they would do in Arab culture is you can stack on lamb and then a little bit of, I guess, lamb fat, and you would kind of just keep piling up the layers on this giant rotisserie. And then after it's all cooked, you'd slowly slice away at it in thin little layers, kind of like going to a deli and then shaving off the meat for you. But since this is chicken or shawarma, the shawarma is a little bit harder to cut because the chicken's a little bit more, it's just harder to cut. It's a little bit more sinuous. But overall, I think it's come out to look really beautiful. It's a nice golden brown. And so now we're actually ready to create the chicken shawarma and have somebody sample it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the chicken pile it onto our pita bread. And then I'm going to take the sauce and we're going to just go ahead and put a little bit of that over. Not too much because it's going to be pretty spicy. And then finally roll it up. And then add in the cucumber and the tomato. It's already dripping. And then the pita bread's very crumbly, but once you get it to go together, it should look somewhat like this right here. All the chicken, you got your sauces, and you got a little bit of cucumber and a little bit of tomato just to give it a really nice color. And that is your chicken shawarma. He has agreed to taste test the shawarma for me. In exchange for him filming my CLE, I've decided to be nice to him and let him have some of the most beautiful cooking in the world. What do you think, Caleb? Is it good?
This is really good. The texture is great.
Thought you might say that.
It's just really, really good. The shawarma, it tastes a little citrus, which I really love citrus a lot. It's really colorful, great use of colors.
The seasoning kind of tastes a bit like Mexican food, like a taco seasoning, just a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost looks like it could go in maybe a quesadilla or something.
Yeah. Yeah, the seasonings are actually really, really similar. And but it definitely has that citrus flavor, and I think that definitely sets it apart from something you would just find in a Mexican restaurant.
And the only bad thing I can take away from this is it is a little spicy.
Right.
I guess
sauce.
I guess that's because of the seasoning you use.
The extra green pepper would have done that.
Yeah. But overall, it's definitely a good dish I would recommend for others who want to go to Israel.
Would you go to Israel and try it?
Absolutely.
Would you try it again if I were to make it?
Yes. Because
you hesitated.
Yes, I would.
That's good.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Be sure you try shawarma, everyone. It's a really great dish.
Thank you. Thank you for watching my CLE project, and now I want to tell you a few phrases in Hebrew in case you ever go to Israel yourself. So, hello and goodbye is shalom, toda is thank you, kin is yes, and lo means no. Vavashka means please, which is a very useful phrase no matter where you're going. Slicha is excuse me, and lo havanti is I do not understand. To ask somebody the price of something, you would say kama ze ole, which is how much is it? Ani rotze is I would like. And do you speak English is ada medabar anglit.